I rarely see someone who doesn't have some kind of cognitive limitation as a result of their physical condition. And the reason I say that is because the effect it has on, there's one thing that has an effect on the body, but the mind is often stronger than the body. So how does someone who's suffering with pain or severe bowel incontinence or whatever disruption in their life not have some kind of emotional reaction to that would not have a significant impact on their work? I mean, the greatest thing we have in life is health, right? And when that goes away and the person's suffering, how do you show that on paper to the disability insurance company? Hi, I'm attorney Greg Dell, joined by attorneys Cesar Gavidia and Stephen Jessup. And guys, we're going to talk today about one of Stephen's resolved cases recently against Lincoln Financial Group. And Stephen, I know it was obviously a long-term disability insurance denial, and we always like to get together every week and talk about some of the recently resolved cases, which can help people learn why the disability insurance company is denying a claim, which ends up helping them either prepare a strong appeal or take actions in their own claims that will help them prevent a denial. So give us a little bit of the background of this particular case.
Yeah, so my client was a nurse for a hospital, suffering from really severe gastrointestinal issues, had multiple surgeries, were just preventing, constant, bowel incontinence was her main issue. That was preventing her from obviously working as a nurse. She went out on disability, filed, short-term was approved, long-term disability was approved. But like so many times in these cases, she had a 24-month own occupation, policy. So within the first 24 months, though, she was about a year and a half in, Lincoln had her file reviewed by a single doctor. And that doctor's opinion is that following some recent surgeries, it seemed that there would be nothing that would prevent her from going back to work. And even quoting and saying that because she's able to absorb food better, her energy should be well enough to see her return to her former occupation, which was deemed to be a light-duty occupation. She also suffered from secondary mental health problems, depression, anxiety, and even had issues with regards to her cognitive functioning, whether it was related to how messed up her digestive tract was and her gut health and all that. But the simple argument, we just don't see enough objective evidence to support continued restrictions and limitations, and they ended up denying her.
I just want to ask you something. You said they denied her 18 months in. Mm-hmm. Were they denying her, saying she couldn't do the duties of her job?
Only own occupation, which this will come out later, And so anytime when we're doing an appeal where it's at that threshold, I like to do the appeals not only for her own occupation, but trying to set it up for any occupation as well, knowing that by the time the appeal is submitted, they make their review, you could be at that threshold of that 24 months.
Can you just clarify that? Because some people who are watching this video don't know what you're talking about when you say the own occupation versus any occupation.
Yeah, so typical policy language for the first 24 months of long-term disability, you're disabled if you can't perform the material and substantial duties of your job. Then after that 24 months, you're disabled if you can't perform material and substantial duties of any occupation. It's based upon training, education, and experience, right? So first period, it's can you do your job as they define it in the national economy, and then usually after that point, it's some lesser job. So when we were preparing her appeal, since a lot of the argument was, she was horribly physically deconditioned. She went through multiple surgeries. It was probably, I would say, the most severe, case, if I say a gastrointestinal case that I've represented. With her deconditioning and everything, we did send her to a functional capacity examination because Lincoln's doctors, they love to play this game as, not even really looking at what occupational duties are, just determine if there's restrictions and limitations. Saying he gave her a clean bill of health, right? So the functional capacity examination would be able to establish physically, could she show up to work and be able to do her duties? The testing went through. She had to take, breaks all the time. And a lot of the breaks were because of the bowel incontinence. That came back, the examiner's opinion. There's no way she could sustain full-time work at any level, sedentary, light duty, whatever the case may be. And then Lincoln had some issues because the depression and those complaints, she was only treated with her primary care doctor. So they're trying to say, not under the appropriate care, it's not anything bad enough. We took I would say, not a gamble, but I just felt in my discussions with her that Cognitively, she just never seemed to be there. So we did do a level of cognitive testing, not a full neuropsychological battery, but that cognitive testing also came back that she was experiencing a bunch of deficits, and that was associated not only with depression, but more so the examining doctor felt it was a byproduct of just the level of deconditioning she had. Like, almost, I guess, if you think about it, if you haven't eaten, you're starving, right? Physically, cognitively, everything goes. So we submitted the appeal. It took them quite some time to get the review done. They took their 45-day extension. Never a situation where, we got the, hey, here's our doctor's reports, you can respond to it. We ended up getting an approval letter. The approval, 12 pages long, said she can't do her own job, but we found all these other jobs we think she could do, right? So like, in one we spoke about earlier, Cesar, you were talking about, that guy could be a dispatcher and all these things, very common things to say. This lady was like a chart nurse or a reception nurse, things of that nature. So in this appeal, because everything was so brand new information-wise, we did the appeal very quickly. We added some updated medical, but the basis of our appeal was just arguing all the objective evidence we provided in the first appeal that their reviewing doctor thought meant nothing. On the second appeal, though, and like I said, no new objective evidence, just the arguments that we made in our first and just doubled down against their peer review. And Lincoln did end up then approving the claim into the any occupation stage at this point. And she's been on claim through that now. Probably it's been about 5-6 months since she's been approved fully through any occupation.
That's it's crazy that you win that appeal as a nurse in light duty. They go, but you can go back to a desk and do some other work, which is it makes absolutely no sense.
And not to mention all the information we had supported an inability for sedentary work of any sort. So, and the fact that we were able to just make our arguments on that and against their vocational analysis they did in our appeal, whoever looked at it, like we won't know who looked at it because the case was approved, agreed with everything we had to say and disagreed with everything Lincoln's initial reviewing doctor had to say.
And Cesar, from a strategy standpoint, I wanted you to get your opinion on, Stephen talked about having a cognitive assessment done, but what we know from a lot of these Lincoln disability policies is that often they will limit the period of disability benefits for some kind of mental nervous condition to 24 months, right? So how do you go about presenting cognitive difficulties without potentially jeopardizing the client being limited by that 24-month benefit limitation?
Well, I think what Steve mentioned is that they didn't go with full battery of cognitive testing, but kind of a limited battery of cognitive testing. And I think what's also important is that the primary disabling conditions here weren't any mental illness. It was physical disabilities or physical conditions that were preventing her from returning to not just her occupation, but any gainful occupation, right? So there are many, many physical conditions that can cause executive function problems, cognitive delays and problems, and even the medications that are prescribed for those conditions to treat those conditions have those types of side effects. So I think what's important is the focus on the medical history, on the conditions, what kind of symptoms those conditions can cause, and because those conditions are well known to cause cognitive issues with relating, especially with chronic pain or chronic fatigue, it causes a deconditioning. It causes a degeneration of one's attention, focus, concentration, executive function. And when a real comprehensive cognitive exam is done, not one done by one of the thousands of what they call independent medical or psychiatric or like cognitive examiners that they have, but one that's done by a truly independent, neutral examiner who's doing a really reliable testing, that can be focused on, and it can be identified that that's where those cognitive deficits are coming from.
Right, and guys, in almost all of my claims, I rarely see someone who doesn't have some kind of cognitive limitation as a result of their physical condition. And the reason I say that is because the effect it has on, there's one thing that has an effect on the body, but the mind is often stronger than the body. So how does someone who's suffering with pain or severe bowel incontinence or whatever disruption in their life not have some kind of emotional reaction to that that would not have a significant impact on their work. I mean, the greatest thing we have in life is health, right? And when that goes away and the person's suffering, how do you show that on paper to the disability insurance company? Because often, not in your case, Steve, because there was obvious evidence of this bowel incontinence, or because you said she had surgeries. But sometimes we have a lot of people with gastrointestinal issues where the objective testing comes back with no abnormal findings. And not only just in the gastrointestinal issues cases that we hire, but how many cases do we have where the objective evidence just doesn't show anything? But we know from our experience and from talking to doctors and handling thousands and thousands of claims, more than 65% of people who go to the doctor don't have objective documented evidence of what's causing their pain, symptoms, limitations. Does that mean that 65% of these people are going to the doctor and there's really nothing wrong with them? We're not talking about people who are going for disability claims. We're talking about people who are going to the doctor saying, doctor, this is what's wrong with me. Why is it happening? And the doctor does all the testing and says, I don't know why it's happening, but doesn't mean it's not happening. So that shifts over to this cognitive type testing that we have available, that we kind of lean towards being a forensic type testing, and we're able to use that as evidence to prove that a person's disabled. But when I started the question to you, Caesar, that's difficult for a claimant who doesn't have a legal professional helping them, because you have to tout that line between having something that limits, that could make them say, this is a mental nervous condition. And we see that all the time in the gastrointestinal issues, because a lot of times there isn't objective, like,
Or it's anxiety related,
yeah, or
gastro issues.
IBS, for example, very common. And they go, no, that's a mental condition. We don't doubt you have it, but we're only going to pay you for 24 months. So great job, Steve, in this case, to be able to get that additional evidence. You obviously had some strong physical evidence. Again, another situation where disability companies is looking for a reason to deny a claim. You even win the appeal the first time, and then they go, but we're going to make you do it again. So huge inconvenience for the client. It's another delay tactic by an insurance company not to, single out this company in particular. They're all doing it. Luckily, people like us are able to help them to stop them from doing it and not let them get away from it. So great job. If you're someone out there who has a long-term disability insurance claim and you need help, no matter where you live in the country, we're available to assist you. Contact Caesar, Steve, and myself. We'll always provide you with a free consultation.